we shouldn't take it.
This
Yeah,
meeting
yeah.
is being
We shouldn't take it
recorded.
lightly. We contribute in every which way, and we just hope the Ramona Shalom hears all of our calls, whether it's tefillas, tehillim, learning. Just have to continue doing everything.
Yeah, well, Tzvi started to say something. Tzvi, you're muted right now.
That was it was a loop through of the recording is started message.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we have now.
Hello, Mr. Parnas and the staff and Rabbi Grauman and
Good
Mr.
morning. Good
Fine.
morning, Tzvi.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tzvi. So we're up to the Mishnah on Samach Ches Amud Aleph, near the bottom. We're going to learn about a fascinating and interesting topic, which we all know by name, but now we're going to get into it in more detail and we'll see how it interacts with ribbis and all the other things we've been talking about. So the topic is the term iska. We've heard that, ribbis is forbidden, but you can do a heter iska in modern times so that you could make it so that it shouldn't be ribbis. That's kind of, for most people, what iska means. But we're going to get into it now to understand in a little bit more detail what our Chazal meant when they said iska. So let's pause a moment. Let's just back up. Basically, an iska is a partnership. It's a partnership of a venture that two people enter into, not unlike businesses all over the world. One person supplies the money or whatever it is that is the goods of the partnership, and the other person does the work. So the investor, let's call him the investor, invests, puts in money, he doesn't do any of the work, and the other partner does the work. So the question then becomes, what's the balance between the two? Is it just strictly arm's length that one is money and one is business and one is the manager, and therefore there's no issue? I mean, at least on the surface, there shouldn't be an issue. But when we understand exactly what is going on, this is where it becomes a question. So let's just understand. I have $1,000, and Jay, you are a businessman. And I say to you, I'm going to give you $1,000. You're going to do whatever the business is, doesn't matter. You're going to do the business for me, and then we're going to share the profits. That happens every day, thousands of times. Now, when we share the profits, so let's just say that you and I get together and we say, you know what? We think this business will be very profitable. So if I give you $1,000, let's agree that the return should be, let's say 30%. Okay, 30% return on the money. But since we are 50-50 shutfim, even though you don't have any money, so so 30% is $300. So my chelik that I'm putting into the deal isn't $1,000. It's $1,150, and you theoretically are putting in 150. In other words, as the financier, I am looking at it as if I'm going to make my Karen, my principal is now up to 1,150. So that's the scenario that we're going to be dealing with now. So you could see right away that at least from the surface, when he makes that money, it shouldn't be ribbis because that's an investment. He made an investment, and his investment was $1,150 because the party said that that's what the return would be. So it's open and shut. The manager gets 150, the financier gets 1,150, and everybody goes home. Now, that's on the profit side. What happens if there are losses? Let's say that it didn't do well, and not only did it not make profit, it lost $200. So the money investor, the investor, would get back $800. But what happens to his other $200? So originally, the way it was set forth is, okay, sorry, you made an investment, you lost $200, you get back 800. The manager gets nothing because there's no money, and Zahu, and that's the end of the deal.
But there's no more money on the table. The business closes.
The business, right? The business closes.
Just to
The
close.
investor gets his money back, albeit with a loss. Right.
Right. Okay.
So then the Chazal came along and basically said, no, that isn't right. That's not the way business should be conducted. What does that mean? So what it means is that when I enter that partnership with you, I am taking a responsibility. The financier, am taking a responsibility for 50% of the deal, and you need to take 50% responsibility for the 50% of the deal because you're going to make 50% of the profit. So now all of a sudden, if there's a gain, okay. So all of a sudden, what's happening here? If we make the money l'chayra, and this is where it's going to get interesting. On the surface, you'll make your 1,150, and I'll make 150. If there's a loss of 800, and he gets back 800, then I take a loss of 50%, and you take a loss of 50%, meaning that you, the manager, have to come up with another $100 to give to me, because that's your chalik of the loss. Because the loss is just the same as the gain. There's a loss. So if there's a loss, I, the financier, have to take 50% of the loss, of course. But you also have to take 50% of the loss. So that what you're at the end of the day, when we close shop, I'll get my 800 plus 100 from you, right? 100 from you, and then each of us will take $100 loss.
Rabbi, is it true the same thing on the gain side?
On the gain and on the loss, correct. Now, on the loss side, it's pretty straightforward. Why? Because if we're going to say that they're partners in all the losses, so then if I put up the money, I'm taking a 50% risk, but you as the manager also have to have a risk.
You as the worker.
Pardon?
You as the worker, because one work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the worker has to take a loss, but he has no money.
Well, I mean, he owes him. He has no money. He owes him that money. I mean, that's an achrayus that he owes him the money. All
right. But the fact that you provided this money, this seed money for the project, he may not have any other funds.
Well, that's what Jay was saying. So, but
right. That's
on paper he owes him 100.
Right.
I mean, in other words, you can go to Bezdin and say, "I want my 100," and Bezdin says you're entitled to your 100. The Metzias of whether he has it or not, of course, is always a question. But the halacha is he owes it. So now let's look at the gain side for a minute, because that's where it gets interesting. When I give you the money, $1,000, that $1,000 is really a component. Two components make up that $1,000. What are the two components? Since we are 50-50 partners, so I own 50%. That's my chalik. The other 50% is interpreted as a loan. I am lending $500 to the partnership, from which I will make $150. So now that there's two chalakim, two parts to this arrangement, now we'll have a question. What happens if he makes the $150? So question number one, okay, they agreed that would be his chalik. Okay, so on the money that he invested, he'll make the $150. But on the $500 that he lent to the partnership, what's his return? So l'chayra, his return is the service that the manager is doing to implement the deal.
The worker's doing that.
The worker, I say the worker. That gives rise to the question, that looks like ribis, because he lent him $500, and the worker for that $500 is going to provide a service, and then he's going to return that $500. But the work that he did, the seller is not compensating him for it, so it looks like ribis.
But
because he's getting something in return for the $500 that he lent him.
But the worker never gave him 500. The worker didn't have any money. All he had was a snowblower, and he was going to go around the neighborhood and make the profit for the business. So he never gave him anything. And there was never a actual loan signed. There's no shtar for anything, even though the partnership says if we make money, then we share the profits.
Okay, so what was the $1,000 for? The $1,000 was to buy the snowblower.
No, the $1,000 was to go into the bank account, which had two names on it, and that bank account went out and bought a snowblower.
Bought the snowblower, correct. So they bought the snowblower. So then the way the Chazal interpreted it is, okay, I put up the $1,000, but since we're shutfim on the deal, so I can consider half of my money was remember, they're 50-50 partners. So my 50%, I'm achroi. You have nothing to do with it. The other 50% that you have in achrayus is a loan. It's not a, in other words, we interpret the investment as a loan. I'm lending $500 to the partnership in order to get a return.
But the partnership is not a person here. The partnership is a theoretical thing because
no. Right, but you as the worker have an achrayus to me, the guy with the money, the investor, to return $150 to each of us. That's your achrayus. You have a personal responsibility now that you owe $150 to me. So the Gemara.
But if it's a corporation partnership,
no. But you're getting into the fine points of corporation partnership. We're talking straight. They didn't know from that back in the time of the Gemara. You and I came down. We said, let's have a deal. I have $1,000.
Okay,
you do the work. I get the money.
Who owns the snowblower?
No, the snowblower is owned jointly. But at some point in time, you are going to have to return that $1,000 to me. So I don't know. You're going to sell the snowblower. I don't know what you're going to do. Okay, a snowblower may not be the greatest example because it's a chayfetz that then what do you do with it? In other words, what are we going to do with that snowblower? So the traditionally, when you think about it, the deal is I have $1,000. I'm going to buy $1,000 worth, give you $1,000 to buy $1,000 worth of produce, which you're going to sell on the market, and there's going to be a profit. In other words, we're not worrying about the return. What's going to happen to the snowblower? We don't care because the produce is going to be eaten and the money will come back. So that makes it a little bit easier to understand.
Okay.
But Rabbi, at the end of the day, since we are 50-50, so half of my money is my achrayus, and the other half is a loan for which I'm expecting to make a return. So the kasha becomes, what is your responsibility? So your responsibility is to do the work. So to the outside world, it looks like I'm lending you $500 and you're giving me a benefit of the work and then returning my $500 or whatever it happens to be. And that looks like ribis. That's how this whole thing gets.
Well, Rabbi, why does it look like ribis? We have a partnership where someone is contributing the assets and the other one is contributing his work.
Right.
He's not getting paid for the work. So in essence, we can say that the value of the work is equivalent to the amount loaned. So therefore, they have an equal investment. One puts up money, but doesn't have to physically work. The other one is physically working. So why isn't the assumption that he's got to get paid for his work? So they're both putting in the equal
Okay.
value of that.
Yeah. So Michael, you touched on something that we're going to talk about, whether or not the worker gets a wage, whether or not he gets a schar, independent of everything. Are you paying him for his time? So there's a different focus on that, which I don't want to discuss at this moment, because right now we're talking about where there's no wage. The only thing that the worker, that Jay, will get out of this deal is the profit that we anticipate, the $150 that he will make. That's what he's going to get out of this. Nothing more, nothing less. So then the question becomes, if Jay undertakes the deal so that he is mechuyev for half of the profits and half of the losses, so that again, Chazal look at this and say, when a person makes that arrangement has two components to it. It's not as simple as just what you said. It has two components. One component is I invest $500, which I'm taking a risk. And the other $500 is a loan for which we both take a risk. Okay, fine. So he takes a risk. But now he's got to work to get that money back. So Chazal say, when we look at it, that is a benefit to me, the investor, on top of the return. Besides the $150, he's also doing work. So to someone looking at the deal, that's the reason why, Michael, it looks like ribis, is because it's not just $150 to you, $150 to me. It's $150 to you, $150 to me, but as the worker, I have to work to get that $150. So when I repay the loan, I'm repaying the loan with work worth X dollars. And that work is what is ribis.
I want to clarify the situation. I thought the case was where the investor just invested and the other guy who did not put money in was contributing the labor. He was going to do, correct, in Jay's example, the snow blowing.
Right.
In which case they're both giving something because the value of the work, let's say, is equivalent to the $500 he invested. Correct. So he doesn't have to do any work, the investor. He's waiting for the other guy is considered investing his time and effort, which commands a value. And so therefore they're both investing. And that's how you avoid the fact that there's ribis.
But Michael, the worker is not being paid. If he's being paid, then you could say, okay, he's being paid for his work, and now let's see if there's going to be a profit or not.
No, I think that's the.
Go ahead.
I think that's the whole point, is that he's not being paid. He's not being directly paid. In the end, he'll make some profit if it all goes well. And it's the fact that he's not. If he was getting paid, that this wouldn't even. Wouldn't apply.
That's why I said when Michael was talking about wages, different story.
But it's in lieu of wages. In other words, right, if this guy was to go out and do this as for a salary, here it would be worth $500.
Right. He's investing his time, which has a value,
and that time is ribis. That time,
but it's not ribis because
that's his share in the thing.
Right.
Michael's providing the money. I'm providing the work.
Exactly.
Each of us is putting in nominally $1,000, and if it all works out, we're each making $150.
If I don't get anything, my work was for naught. Just like the other guy's $500
dollars gets lost, my work gets lost if it doesn't work.
So it's an investment of time which has value, and they're both contributing an equivalent amount, and that's what I thought the Heter Isker was trying to encompass here.
Right. So two facts. One that you pointed out, that there's no wage here. That's a very critical part to understand, because a wage takes us out of this entire discussion, because then it's an arm's length deal. I get paid for my work. We share the profit or the loss. Everybody goes home. That's a very straightforward case. But there is no wage. If I'm the investor and I put the money up, then I take a risk on my money. You take a risk on your labor. But if there's a profit, if there is a profit, then the profit is because of your labor. So the investor, me, gets the benefit of your work to make the money. And that's what Chazal say is ribbis.
It's not. I as a worker, don't have the money to put up. I'm investing my time and I'm taking all of that, which I could have earned a wage for. My wage has a value. I'm investing that. I may get nothing out of it. You put up the money. You don't have to do work. And I'm doing the work in lieu of money because I don't have it. So they're each an equal partner in the sense that they've put up something, because somebody's not going to work for nothing unless they're a volunteer. And this is a business deal. So why does Chazal not value the time that a person would otherwise get paid for if they were doing the work for someone else?
Well, during the time that you're waiting until you get the work to be done, there's an interim part. You're not getting paid for that, but yet you're still a partnership with the person that's giving you out the money.
But you don't have a chance to earn money until he starts working.
Exactly. But you've made a partnership, because what good is it me starting a business if I don't have somebody to do the work?
Right. I agree. And so the investor is saying, and we have so many deals like that today, the investor is saying, I'm going to put up the money because you don't have the money to buy the snowblower in Jay's example. And I'm going to put up my effort, my work, which we're going to delineate, X amount as wages for working, because I don't get paid for that. So I'm contributing my time and effort. You're contributing your dollars, and we
wait for the snow to come. Right. And we wait for the snow to come.
Right.
When the snow comes, you do your work.
Today we made our money.
And tomorrow. Work 24 hours now.
So I don't understand how that's ribbis, because he would not have invested his time, the worker, unless he had something, something to work with. He doesn't have the money to put in for in this case, the snowblower, whatever case you put in. And so the investor is saying, I'm putting the money behind it so you can get this started. You're going to do the work, and we're sharing it 50-50. But I've contributed something. Just because it's not money, it has a value equivalent to money.
Okay. So what I guess the CUDA, the point that we're struggling with is when the worker does the work, if there's a profit, each one gets his share of the profit. That's pretty straightforward, right? Because that's what he's working for.
That was the deal.
No. In lieu of a wage, he's getting a profit. In lieu of a wage, he's getting a profit. But the Chazal say, what happens if there's no profit? Let's say there's a loss. And if there's a loss, the financier has to take half the loss, and the worker has to take half the loss. So since Chazal established that in such a scenario, this is what the Rabbanim established, that in such a scenario, half of the money that I put in is my risk. But since we're 50-50 partners, I am lending you as if I'm lending you $500, for which you need to return to me my chelek of the profits. Now, if there is a loss, then you, the worker, don't make anything. If you don't make anything, then I'm getting a free service, albeit it didn't work out, but I'm getting a free service, i.e., your work to make money for us. And since it didn't pan out, and you're not independently rewarded by some kind of a wage, that the Chazal said looks like ribbits because you did work for free. You didn't make any money. If you had made money, then it would have been considered a transaction that it was profitable. But if there's no money to be made, then all I'm doing is a free service to you, albeit it didn't work out. And that free service, says Chazal, looks like ribbis. I understand your contention here, Michael. I understand what everybody's asking.
Rabbi, it's all arbitrary, but I want to point out something that you said before, which is if the partnership was to dissolve, they would get, and they sold the snowblower, they would get half each of that money because it was in the partnership. So
Right.
They're both giving risk. It's arbitrary that because it's a 50-50 partnership, the money he puts up is 50% investment loan and 50% investment. That's absolutely arbitrary. And my work, so I have to get things set up. I've got to get the snowblower in condition. I got to do everything like that. The counterpart to that is that I'm going to spend my time. You're giving money. I'm spending my time. I realize that my time may not get a return, and I may lose anything for my time. To say that the profit is coming for the wages is incorrect, because the profit is split. It means that I'm getting nothing for my work, but whatever we pull in is split 50-50. So in essence, I'm only getting half of what for my wages, because I invested the time and that's what I wanted to do, because I don't have the capital to get the equipment that I need to perform my task. So
Right.
I don't understand how you can say this is ribis, because you're not giving any value to the investment of time that the person is making. The Chazal is making it like that has no value and you're doing it for nothing. Whereas the investor who's putting up the money is risking that money.
But the
So the fact that it's just not right.
Chazal is looking at this from the investor's viewpoint, not from the worker's viewpoint. And that's why he ends up with benefit, which they're calling ribis. Right, Rabbi?
Well, Michael said something that is, Michael, you said that it's arbitrary how you take this money and divide it up. And that's really not true. The Chazal have said that in this particular situation, this fact pattern, it's not arbitrary. In other words, I have the money. And when I put the money in, I'm not putting the whole $100 in as an investment or as a loan. Since we are 50-50 partners on the upside and the downside, I take responsibility for 50% of the money, and that's my money. But the other 50%, and this is, Michael, what I think is the issue here. The other 50% is I'm lending. You're saying it's no, that doesn't. That's what the Chazal is saying, that is a loan to the partnership. And for that loan, I expect to get a return. Now, you're not making any money because you're not getting a salary. So how are you going to make money? Well, if it's profitable, you make money. But that was the original deal, that each one of us gets 50%. But if it's not profitable and there's a loss, then just stop and think for a minute. I lent you $500. Not only did I not make money, but I lost money. So
wait a
you
minute.
own,
You put in $1,000.
but the ikar is the Chazal is distinguishing, which you kind of pasted over the surface. The Chazal is saying that 1,000 isn't just 1,000; it's 500 and 500.
But it's
That's
only
where the
500
point
and 500 because they're splitting 50-50.
right. So
But
500 is
that
a
doesn't
loan.
necessarily hold. It
But
could
Michael,
be
but
more or
500.
less. It could be 20-80, and they still split profits 50-50 because the amount of the snowblower may be more or less based on the overall. So to say that because I put this in, it's 50-50, it depends how much the investment is, how much work you do.
No,
I
no,
mean,
but
that's totally arbitrary.
the case is that you and I sat down and we said we're going to construct a deal. I'll put up all the money, you put up the labor, we'll split 50% up and 50% down. If it's profitable, we'll each make money, and if it's not profitable, we'll lose money. So if it's profitable and you're the worker and you make money, no issue, because that was your schar. Listen, just let me finish. That is your schar, and you can't be taxed with ribis on schar that you earned. The problem arises if there is a loss, so that you haven't gotten anything for your labor. But I got free labor. I got free labor. You worked for it and didn't get paid. That free labor, I'll say, appears to be ribbons. So I understand you're
Rabbi,
raising.
but we're assuming, and we know in partnerships that this is not the case. We have people who invest more than others and have a partnership interest higher, but they can still share profits 50-50. And what we're saying is that we're making an arbitrary assumption, I'm sorry to keep using the word, that the investment is equal to 50-50, whereas it depends on what they put in and how much work is being done and what the profits are going to be. And the partners agree to what that is going to be before the agreement is consummated. So all I'm trying to say is that you're working and getting nothing. Your risk is risking your time that we will have it. But I couldn't do my work if you didn't contribute the snowblower or whatever you want, or the money to purchase what I needed to do things without it. So we're both contributing. What we agree as partners is an equivalent, either 50-50 or a percentage that we deem appropriate based on what we have. So you're both risking assets. The time is your decision to invest that time to start a business. And oftentimes it's, the investor is relying on you to perform. So I just don't understand how that time has no value. And if he gets money back, it's ribbis. You're making the decision. I don't have the money to put up, but I'm willing to put up my time because I get paid for that. Otherwise, that's an investment.
Right. But again, I want to do it inside of the Mishnah, but let me just say the following. When the venture is not profitable, look at it from the worker standpoint. What did he get out of the deal? He got nothing, plus he has to come up with half of the loss.
But that's his risk, that because he didn't have money to put into the business, he put his time, and each of them are risking, let's say it's equivalent value. And if he didn't get a return and he had to kick in more money, that's because the business was not successful. And usually the one who's putting up the money doesn't conduct the business. They may manage it, but they don't conduct the business. There are, of course, exceptions to that rule. And so you're putting in your time, I'm putting in my money, and we both have a chance to win or lose. And, that's not ribbis.
Okay, so this is the nuance I think that we're missing here, is that from the worker standpoint, his position is that if we're profitable, then that was the business arrangement. We each make 50% of the profits. But listen to this. if we're not profitable, and Chazal say that 50% of what I, the investor, put in is a loan to the partnership. 50% is my money, I take the risk, and 50% is a loan for which we both take the risk up or down. That's the way Chazal said the deal is looked at. You may argue that, but that's the way Chazal said you look at the deal. So if you accept that for the moment, that that's the way the deal is structured, if there is not a profit, the worker makes nothing. He basically has put in a service that the investor has benefit from, albeit with a loss. So that service, the work that he put in, if he made profit, then there's no issue because he made profit and the deal structured as you should make profit. But if he doesn't make profit and he walks away with nothing, then I, the investor, will have gotten a free service, albeit with a loss. That's besides the point. I will have gotten a free service because you will not have gotten any money. You will have gotten nothing. So someone on the sideline will say, you see that? He gave him a loan. The loan was for a certain amount of money. He had to repay. Okay, it was a business he had to repay, and you and the worker made no money. So, but by not making any money, he is giving the investor, me, a free service. It's a free work because he's not getting any benefit. That's what the key is. Now, before we go further, let's just read into the Mishnah, and maybe when we see the words of the Mishnah, we'll understand what we're talking about, because it's a little conceptual, and I understand the concern, but let's just read the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, Ein moshiven chenveni, l'machzeschar. You can't, in other words, this arrangement that we just were talking about, that an investor makes a deal with a chenveni, who's a storekeeper, right? And he's going to give him $1,000 worth of bananas, and l'machzeschar, and so he has to sell the bananas, and they agreed, they anticipated, there's no way of knowing, but they anticipated the profit would be, let's say, 30%. So going into the deal, each one knew, that could be better, of course, but or even a little bit less as long as there's a profit. But we're just talking about specific. So they agreed on 30%, and it hit the mark. It was exactly 30%, and the investor got half of it, and the storekeeper, the chenveni, got half of it. Says the Mishnah, you can't do that. Okay, fine. Second case is that I, the investor, didn't give you produce. I gave you money. Okay, and there is a chilik, which the Gemara will talk about. In the first case, the investor trucked in $1,000 worth of bananas, and in the second case, he gave him $1,000 and said, "You go ahead and buy it." All right, so we're going to see whether or not that makes a chilik. The Gemara will talk about it, but it's the same scenario. He gives him the money, and the agreement is l'machzeschar, for half the profit. You can't do it. Now, here are the key words, and Michael, you alluded to this. Ella im kein los schar kapoel. Unless I give you a wage, and I'm saying you're going to make $100 in this transaction, no matter whether it's profitable or a loss. Now you have earned $100, and that's 100% yours. Now, wait a minute. If I get a wage and that wage is mine, then there's no chashash of ribbis, there's no chashash of anything because I got paid. The problem is if I'm not getting paid, I'm only making money through the deal. And if the deal goes sour, then I have given, if the deal is profitable, I make money. But if the deal goes sour, I make no money, and I have worked hard for the benefit of myself and the investor. And that benefit to the investor, says the Gemara, is a chashash ribis. Why? Because the financier, now forget about profit or loss. Forget about profit or loss. If there is a profit, this whole discussion is moot because the worker made his money through the work. But if he made no money and he just took a loss, or even if he broke even, but here he took a loss, then what he's done is he's worked for nothing. The investor has gotten the benefit of that work, albeit a loss, but he's gotten the benefit of that work. So someone looking at the deal will say, interesting, this deal was the investor put in $1,000. They lost money. The worker worked hard, made no money. It looks like he worked for the investor for that loan. And again, there was no money to be made, but working for the loan is something that is on top of in other words, working for the loan without making a profit is what opens the door to ribbis, Michael. If you make money, you can't say it's ribbis because there was an agreement. But if you don't make money and you give service, then someone will say, you know what? He worked hard for that loan. It didn't work out, but we should say that he's over the lav of ribbis because he entered into an arrangement. Ribbis doesn't mean necessarily that you make a profit. Ribbis means that you give someone something more than the loan agreement. The loan agreement was 50-50. And here, not only was it not 50-50, I mean, it was 50-50 on the loss. If he did no work and just stood there and people came in and bought the product and, give him the money, whatever. But once he lifts a finger to do anything, whether it's to buy the produce or to put it on the shelf or whatever he had to do, then when no money is made, it certainly looks like he has given of his time and effort on behalf of that loan. Because remember, Chazal is saying that 50% of that deal is a loan. And if 50% is the loan, and then you're the worker and you've put all this effort in and gotten and for the loan and gotten no money, then you have exerted service on behalf of the loan for the investor. And therefore, what you have given is technically ribbis.
Rabbi,
yeah.
Let me just clarify. We talking bananas. Let's talk bananas. So there's a cost of the bananas.
Yep.
Right. And this guy is selling them. He goes and buys the bananas from the wholesaler.
Yep.
He sells the bananas.
Yep.
They're not as fresh. They become damaged in 2 days. He sells them for what he can get for them. And it's less than the cost of the bananas.
Right.
So,
but he's working, Michael, he's working all along to do this.
But the investor is putting up his money to buy the bananas, to get the inventory to sell, and the worker is going to make his money. He's not making a profit until the revenue is above the expenses. So that's not really compensating him for the time. It's compensating him for the sales. If effectively it's a wage for selling bananas. But if for some reason the worker has damaged bananas because he didn't care for them in the right way and there's a loss, he brought the loss on, and so the investor loses his investment because they can't even recover the cost. So he loses the money. This guy made the effort. The idea of him working was to share the profits. So he's not getting a wage. He's hoping that the profits will more than compensate, or either equal or more than compensate for his wage. He could have elected to work for a grocery chain and sold the bananas there where he would have been paid a wage to be able to do that. He is an investor too. He's investing his time. And the fact that he chose to do that rather than to work for someone else and get a wage is his risk as an investor. So I don't see how that's ribis again.
From the worker's point of view, what you just said is correct. From the investor's point of view, again, keep in mind that the investor lent the worker $500. $500 he kept, that's my risk. $500 I'm lending to you, you have to give me a return.
But if he
have
doesn't,
to work for the return.
investor
You have to
loses.
work for the return. And if you make money, again, no issues. But let's say you work hard for the return and you make no money. From the investor's standpoint, not okay, look at it from the investor standpoint.
I am.
He has gotten a free service, doesn't have to pay for it, because we lost money, and you did a free service for me. It didn't work out, fine, but you did a free service for me. Once you do a free service over and above a loan, and that's the two things that have to be connected. There's a loan, and then there's a service, and service for a loan is potentially ribis. We're saying that in the iska, if we all make money, then there's no chashash of ribis because I earned money from the deal, which is why the Mishnah says if he paid him a wage, then there's no longer any chashash of ribis because he made money, in other words, he earned money even though the deal was at a loss.
But in effect, he did pay him a wage, Rabbi, because he invested $1,000. Arbitrarily, we're saying it's 500 a loan and 500.
So what is the wage? What is the wage?
The wage is that this guy put up the money for him to work. He's putting in the time, which is equivalent.
But he lent the money. Again, don't overlook the fact that he lent him $500.
But if that money is wiped out, he doesn't. He lent the partnership $500.
No, forget it. I think you're caught up in this question of partnerships and everything else. It wasn't sophisticated, Michael. I came to you with money. I said, go buy the produce. We'll split the profits. If the produce gets damaged, we'll split the losses. And I said, and that's what I said to you. And you said, sure, I don't have to put any money up. I'm happy to do that. The business is profitable because we make money on the bananas, and I get my money, you get your money, and everything is above board. Right. The problem arises when there is a loss and you haven't earned any money not only haven't you earned any money, you're going to owe me money. So the Chazal are saying that when you haven't earned any money, but you've expended labor, hard work to try to make this business successful, then that effort is ribis. That effort that you made to try to make the business successful, albeit you didn't do it, that is considered ribis. Now, you may not consider it ribis the worker, and you say, okay, I took a chance. But from my standpoint as the investor, I got something for free that I didn't pay for. What is that? Your service.
But your service is what you're putting into the business. Which is
why the Mishnah says that once you get a wage, it's no longer free.
I'll make one last statement, Rabbi, and that is what you're calling a partnership is only a splitting of profits and losses. That's
correct.
Not a partnership.
No, it's not a partnership.
A partnership is when you're investing your time. The Chazal is not giving value to the time invested to form a business equivalent where people's time is worth that, and they're each one's putting up time, one's putting up resources, and that there is a potential of risk. I agree that if it was, but you're in a business knowing that's a risk. You know, anyone going into a business is going to say that. The problem with Chazal is that they view time has to be paid for, and money, and it's not equivalent to currency. And time is equivalent to currency because the worker could have worked for someone where he had a guaranteed wage. In this
Correct.
case, he is not a worker. He is an investor that who happens to be putting up his time in lieu of money as an investor.
Okay. I think no, I hear what you're saying, but Michael, I think you're doing too fine of a line with the terms that we're using. When a person puts no money into a deal other than his hard labor, he's not an investor.
But that's where we disagree.
Right. So according to our understanding here, he is not an investor because, quote unquote, he has no risk. When you don't have a risk, you're not. By the terms,
but he has a risk. His risk is that he won't get paid for his time. That's his risk. That shows that the time is an asset that has value.
Right. So if the time is spent and there is no return, then to someone looking at the deal, right? Someone, Menashe, is going to look at the deal, is going to say, wait a minute. He lent him $500. The guy, the worker worked hard, got no pay for it, and there's a loss. But what
Rabbi, if you open your own business, I hear you and I'll stop. But if you open your own business and you have that risk, you may not get anything. You may not get paid for anything.
Right.
So the difference here is that he chose not to go to someone who was going to pay him a wage.
Right.
But he invested his time to start a business, and he asked a comrade to donate funds toward this, and we'll split the profits as they come. And I'm giving my time, you're giving money. Chazal is not equating that time to money, and that's the essence of, they're saying this is a worker, he has to be paid, and time is not equivalent to someone investing money. And that's a fundamental.
Correct. Which is why the Mishnah says that the whole arrangement between a chenveni and a storekeeper and someone who supplies money is tolui ella imkain nosen lo schara b'poel. If he gives him a wage, once he gives him a wage, everything changes because there's no longer the basis to say that the investor got something for free. Even if he lost money, it cost him money.
So let me ask you, if the portion that was considered a loan,
yes,
to the, let's call it a partnership for a second, was considered a wage, I'm donating this money to compensate you for your work here, then he's being compensated for a wage. It may not be full value. We're all estimating. The profits are being estimated.
Right.
So why doesn't that work? And then we call it off ribbon. So I put in a loan, but that loan is to pay.
At the end of the day, does the worker walk away with a couple of shekel in his pocket?
Maybe not. Because if he's not successful and his inventory goes rancid or he doesn't sell it at the right price, that is on him because he didn't take care of things properly.
So Chazal say no, that in order for this to be outside of the whole ribbis discussion, that worker has to have something in his pocket when he walks away, whether it is a profitable venture or not a profitable venture. So if it's a profitable venture, less mandapalik, we don't even talk about ribbis. But if it's not a profitable venture and he has some money in his pocket when he goes away, that's okay, because he didn't give the investor something for free, which could be looked at as ribbis, because he made a couple of dollars. But once he doesn't make any money and he gives time, that's where the appearance of ribbis comes in, because someone will say, get a load of that. This fellow worked hard, made no money, and the investor got the benefit of his time. The benefit of time is ribbis. That's exactly the point. The benefit of time is ribbis. All right, so
Okay,
I think we chewed this out, but okay. So let's finish the Mishnah. But I hear your point, but I think what you're missing here is from the Chazal standpoint. I know what you want to say and how you look at the deal, but from the Chazal standpoint, there are components to this deal, all of which have to be halachically correct. And if one part of it is not halachically correct, that poses a problem. And the problem is, if you were to tell me the investment is a 100% investment and no loan, fine, no problem. We have no issue. But the Chazal interpreted the deal as 50-50. They said 50% of the deal is an investment, 50% is the loan, and he has to get a return of money on his loan. He gets money on his loan, everybody's happy, no ribbis. He doesn't get money on his loan, and the worker doesn't get a wage, so he makes nothing. Then it appears that he's working hard to repay a loan, and that hard work is ribbis to the investor, because the investor would never have been where he was if not for the fact that this guy did the work. Now, the deal's not successful, okay, but he did the work and wasn't compensated for the work. That is the appearance of ribbis. All right, let's just leave it there for now. Let's go to the rest of the Mishnah. So that's, in other words, the answer to the question is just pay the guy, give him some money, and therefore Chazal will not have a problem. Now, let's go a little further. Ein Moshiva.
So the free labor is not a gift. It's just free labor, which is considered ribbis.
That's correct. The free labor is considered ribbis because he got nothing back for receiving the loan. That's exactly correct, Jay. Okay. Now, Ein Moshivan Tarnagolan Lemechza. So this is a slight, again, we're going to understand all the differences here, but this is a little bit different than what we just said. That let's say I'm a farmer, you're a farmer, and I say, here's $1,000 and buy $1,000 worth of chickens, right? Roosters, Tarnagolan, Lemechza. So I'm giving you the money to well, it's not a turnigo. If it's not a rooster, it's because we're talking about laying eggs. So it's a hen. Okay, so I'm giving you $1,000, buy the hens, they'll lay eggs, and we'll split the profit. Right? That's essentially what we just said, but it's a different scenario. The Gemara says you can't do it. Same reasons. I mean, we're not going to go through that right now, but it's the same reasons because again, there was no discussion of how much we would make. So therefore, if there's a profit, that's fine. But if there's not a profit, then again, I'm the farmer and all my work was for naught. So I worked for you because you gave me the loan and it didn't work out. Fine, let's put it aside. Ve'ein shamin egolin umiyachin lemechza. You cannot evaluate the worth of a calf and say this calf is worth $100. Go work it, and so the shepherd or whoever it is goes and works it, and they agree that there will be a 50-50 profit. Now again, it's the same scenario. If it's profitable, fine. If it's not profitable, then the shepherd has worked for the investor. And there was a deal made as to what the value is, and he didn't get his value. If he didn't get his value and the shepherd got no pay, same scenario, then he doesn't, then he's giving free labor. And free labor on what we consider to be his loan is not, that's ribbis. Again, says the Mishnah, and in kenos l'schar amol mizona. How do we get around this? We get around it because the investor, the guy buying the calf to contribute to the deal, has to pay the shepherd schar, a wage. And not only does he have to pay him a wage, but he has to pay for 50% of the feed, of the food that the egel, the calf, will eat. In other words, he has to give him a wage and give him money for the food, in which case the shepherd is compensated. Then there's no chash ribis because they made a deal and I got paid for the deal and the deal worked out or didn't work out. That at that point is not relevant because the key is you got paid. And that's where the Mishnah is emphasizing that once you get paid, it takes it out of the realm of ribis entirely because no one can accuse anybody of providing a service that was not
paid for,
that was not negotiated, that was free. No one can say that. You can only say it when the whole deal is dependent on making a profit. If you make a profit, everybody's happy. But if you don't make a profit and I did hard work, then I've contributed my work to a deal alone, in other words, the loan, and we're back to square one, what we said before. So these are all different scenarios. The Gemara is going to explain why we have to go through all of these, because l'chayra, they all seem alike, right? All these cases seem alike. So that's the Gemara. But right now, the key words are ela imkein nos lo schar amolo mazonim. In the first case, it's just schar because we're talking about bananas. Here we're talking about actual animals, and for animals you have to feed them. So it's not just the wage itself. You have to give them a wage plus. Yeah, since we're 50-50 partners, you have to give them a wage, but you also have to pay for half the feed. In other words, the worker shouldn't be stuck with having to buy all of the feed for the animals.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What if in the investor, and we go back to the case where it's 50-50, half of it's a loan that he invests. What if he says, this is your wage? The loan part is your wage for the time you're going to put in, and I want you to invest that into the business. So therefore, he's getting paid for his time, and then he's putting it back in, and then they get to split the profits 50-50. What's wrong with doing it that way instead of keeping it as a loan? That would solve the problem of the chazal that he wasn't being paid for his time.
Okay, so in your scenario, how say it again? How is he being paid?
So the investor puts up $1,000.
Yeah.
500 is considered an investment. Instead of the other 500 being considered a loan, it's being used as to pay him for the wages he's going to earn in putting this together.
So the investor
and then the worker then invests that into the business, and then it's the same 50-50, and it works out the exact same way.
Okay, so in your situation, the investor invests.
He invests 1,000, earmarks 500 as an investment.
He invests 500, and for that 500, he's paying the worker $500.
Well,
he's not
mine's
lending
a little
him
variation of that.
No. The reason why it's important is the term loan is what is giving us this problem.
Well, but right. So you eliminate the loan. He invests 1,000. He says 500. I'm investing in the business. 500. I'm putting in to pay you for your time.
Period.
On the condition that you put that money back into the business.
And it's your money.
And it's your money.
No problem.
So, in a partnership arrangement, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah, but that's I agree with you. But it's an unrealistic scenario. But I agree with you.
Why is it unrealistic? If you're trying to get around not paying him for his work.
Hold on. What happens if there's a loss?
If there's a loss, they're going to share the loss. However you define it.
No. But it's at the end of the day, is the worker who just got paid 500 and reinvested his 500 and there's a loss, is he going to have to pay anything back to the money guy, to the investor?
Potentially, if there's a loss beyond what the assets are in the business, he is going to have to put up his own along with the investor.
Okay, but as long as he doesn't owe the investor any money, because that 500 was his
Right.
own
I'm saying
money.
we're not calling it a loan. We're saying I'm paying you for your wages on the condition that you invest that money in this business.
Fine, fine.
So that gets around all this appearance of ribis, but it's effectively the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing, because it gets around the appearance of ribis, but if there is a loss where normally the worker would have to come up with money to give to the investor because of the loan, here he does not have to give him any money. So I'm asking you the
Well,
question.
but if the loss is beyond what they've
No,
contributed,
but no. But the investor will take the loss on his half, and the worker will take the loss on his wage half. So
yes,
he'll have to come up with no money to the investor.
unless
Unless
the
what?
loss is beyond the total amount invested.
But he's taking the loss on his wage. If he's taking the loss on his wage, why should he have to give any money to the other
But
guy?
his wage is saying, well, you don't have the
$500.
money. You don't have the
$500.
money, so you're going to invest this in the business. Once I'm going to pay you, and you're going to invest this in the business, and then we're equal partners.
Okay, fine. So you paid me a wage, 500, and you put in 500, and I put my wage in for 500.
Yes.
Okay. Now the bananas get damaged, and it's worth $800, not 1,000.
Yep.
The investor gets his 400.
Yep.
Now you're saying that the worker is going to get $400 back.
Correct.
And he's not going to owe any money to the investor.
Correct.
That's 100% okay.
And so that gets around this. That gets around this ribis. I mean, appearance of
but
ribis.
No one would do that, Michael. No one would do that.
That's not true.
Okay.
What happens if he loses $600 and he's $100 negative?
He's got to contribute his portion.
And if you don't have it,
that's tough. You're going to owe it.
Well, if you're going to owe it,
no. But the key, David, the key in what Michael is saying.
The problem the Chazal has is that somebody's putting in their time and they're not being compensated for it. So a person's putting a loan at total risk. So if you want to, they're worried about the time not being able to be invested. So if you consider it, you're paying him his wages, but he's got to invest it back in the business. You're essentially giving him the money to reinvest, and you're still 50-50. And then there's no profits and losses.
Right. There's no issue of ribis there. None at all.
So and that's my point about investing the time is no different. I mean,
Michael, he's investing time on the wage that he got. He got a wage. He's putting it back.
But the wage is illusory.
No. It's not illusory. You can't have it both ways. Either you gave him $500 as a wage, and the condition was that he puts it back into the deal. He said, "I agree because I think we're going to be profitable." Turns out that there is a loss. The investor has a $500 investment. He takes his loss. The worker has a $500 investment because he invested his wages, and he has a $100 loss. But there's no ribis because he's losing his own money. He's not losing.
Right. But the point is that this is where time is not equivalent. The rabbis will say you can't put in time as an investment, but you have to convert it to money to invest.
See, Michael, in your scenario, time is no longer on the table. What's on the table is he got paid wages.
Well, that's why only reason is to get around the appearance, quote unquote, of ribis.
Right. So I'm agreeing with you. In your scenario, if that's how it plays out, then there's no ribis. I agree with you. There's no ribis. There's no ribis because there's no free time given to the investor because the worker is investing his own money, not relying on the loan from the investor. and therefore there can't be ribbis. I agree with you 100%. Agree with you 100%.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, now, so let's just finish up the Mishnah. Now, one other scenario. Avo mekablin agolinus yochim lemechza. What happens? What happens if they entered into an agreement and there was no value? So if there's a valuation put onto the let's say onto the animals, then that's okay. That's similar to what we said about putting up $1,000, because we know there's a hard number, and we can say, okay, so that animal has to produce a certain amount of money, and if there's a loss, then he takes then it's ribbis. But if the shepherd takes the eglo, the calf, and there's no fixed amount for that calf, and then goes ahead and makes a profit or not, then there can be no ribbis, because no one can point a finger and say, oh, the investor put up $100 for the animal and he's only getting 80 back, and the shepherd, who's not getting paid, gave a free service. He didn't give a free service because there was not an evaluation of the amount. So that this is the exception to everything we have said. We have said that the reason why the worker is considered to have ribbis is because he didn't make any money based on the value of the investment. But here there's no basis for the investment. The Mishnah says, all he did, they said 50-50. He didn't say, I'm investing $100 worth of calf and you have to give me the profit. So the nuance here is that as long as there is not a specific dollar amount attributed to what the investor is putting into the deal, then there cannot be ribbis, because at the end of the day, he can't say you did free work, because what do you mean free work? It's not free work. I had no vested interest in it, and you didn't give me a price. We just said we're going to split it, and so if there's any money to be made, then that's it. So in other words, this scenario where they do not have a specific amount in mind, like for instance, when we said $1,000 worth of bananas or $1,000 worth of money, right? Or in the case of Targul Golan, where they said, okay, in other words, wherever there is a specific dollar amount which is announced in advance, then we have a chash ribbis. Says the Mishnah, where there is no dollar amount in advance, then it's basically 50-50, and the worker will get some money out of it because there's no such thing as a loss. You didn't say that it was $100, you got to give me back $100. Here's the calf, we'll split the profits. Okay? They didn't say the profits are going to be $20 or $30. So once there's no discussion of how much to be made, then intrinsically there's no loss. Remember, the whole issue here is if there's a loss, it's free service. There's no loss. The herdsman, the shepherd is going to get his money. It doesn't matter how much money. It means half the profits. They anticipated $30 and all they got was 10. Doesn't matter, because there was no delineation of how much should be profit and how much should be loss. Okay, the Gemara will have to go into this in more detail. So just to finish the Mishnah, so what achrayus, what responsibility does the shepherd have? Says this has nothing to do with what we just said. So what is the responsibility? So the shepherd has to, there's a machlokes here what that means. The shepherd has to feed the animals and raise them until they are either one third
Those are
of
full.
what their ultimate growth will be, right? One third of the growth will be, or um, or the other alternative is not how much the growth will be, but it will be
For a chamor, for a donkey, it's different.
what's that?
For a donkey, a chamor, it says it's different.
Yeah, the chamor
Criteria.
actually right. The chamor actually two ends. The donkey is different. A donkey has nothing to do with a third or anything else. It's once the donkey is strong enough to carry the burden, to carry the baggage, then that's already considered. The question is, what is the responsibility? Okay, the shepherd got himself a freebie here. I'm giving you a sheep. I didn't say how much money it's worth. Just raise it for me. Raise it for me, and we'll split the profits. The profits are meager, so that it's not a good deal for the investor, but for the worker, it's money in his pocket. So there cannot be ribis because he's making some money because there was no value attached to it. Correct the Gemara. What is the time period for which this shepherd is held accountable? Because you can't just say hefker, right? He has to be accountable for something. So the Gemara says that when they reach a third, let's say it should be, I don't know, 200 pounds, 200 pounds is what this calf should grow to. And it reaches one third of that, which is approximately what, 65, 67 pounds. He has met his responsibility and you can't point a finger. The other interpretation of shlish means you have to wait until it's a shlish 3 years old, meaning that an animal lives for 10 years, and you have to at least make sure that it lives for 3 years. But again, this is not directly bearing on our whole discussion. It's just an understanding of, since basically this herdsman's been given a free hand, do what you do and you'll make some money. Even if I have to take a loss on what I have, you'll make money. No ribbis. And the Gemara wants to know, okay, the Mishnah says, so what is the achrayus? So the Mishnah says the achrayus is that the shepherd at least has to return an animal that is 30% grown or whatever, or a donkey that can carry, cannot, a donkey when it's born can't carry anything on its back. Once the donkey is, I don't know, a year, 2, 3, whatever it is, then it can carry its back. So the Mishnah says that's the price. Okay, that's separate. So Mitzvah Shem, next week we're really going to get into this, and I understand the questions, but Michael, I think you have to have a different mindset here as to what the Chazal were trying to do, and what might happen if someone is looking at this deal and saying this is an unfair deal because they didn't make any money, and the worker got no money. I mean, there was a loss, and the worker got no money, so he provided a free service. Once it's a wage, it's no longer a free service. That's really what you have to focus on, is that as long as there's no wage, it's a free service.
Rabbi, the only thing I'll say is that if you were sole proprietor and did the same thing,
right,
and you asked the investor to put money into a business,
right,
and you said you'd give them a return on that investment, it's not a loan, it's an investment in the business, and you ran all that, you did it all yourself, if you had a loss, it would be okay. But because it's a partnership, it's a problem. And that is, it's a matter of the essence of, you've got to compensate a person for their time. And a person does not have the option in working with somebody else to apply their time as an investment and convert it to dollars, unless they're paid for their time. Uh,
Right.
whether it's
But this worker was so sure that this business would be profitable that he waived any wage. He says, I don't need a wage. I'm going to be profitable in the business. So he took a risk. Okay, if they make money, no problem. But let's say his risk didn't pay off. He did all this work and got no money. The investor lost money, but he got the worker to work the deal and didn't pay him for it. That appears to be ribis because he got a free service. The guy worked hard, made no money, albeit that the investor lost money, but that's besides the point.
It's
The
not
point
besides the
is,
point, but that's what an a joint venture or a partnership is. You're putting in
right,
this is all
right,
Morrisaian, not reality. So
right,
if
right.
you
So
construct
this is the tip of the iceberg of the discussion of ISCA, which we know now, right? We know now, 1,000 years later, that or whatever it is, that there's some way to get around ribis by creating an iska. The Mishnah says you can't do it unless you pay him a wage. Today, again, it's complicated, but when the shtar het to iska, the two partners go into, uses a lot of this language. Maybe I can get a hold of a copy and we can take a look at it and understand that the question of free labor, which is the problem here, goes away. That's what makes a heter iska permissible, is because the parties establish at the very outset what the deal is. And as long as the deal doesn't involve something that one of the partners will benefit freely, then it's okay. If
But
one of the
Rabbi,
partners,
in many cases, this is form over substance. I understand, but
yeah,
it's in modern days we view time as money. And so
right,
therefore somebody has the chance. I mean, it's like opening your own business or working for somebody else,
right.
and so if you are, it's a matter of I'm dedicating my time for the potential to make money. And in essence, I'm investing and I couldn't do it without other resources. So in essence, I'm getting paid for that because I couldn't start it on my own because I don't have the capital. And that's where I guess there's a level of more, I'll call it sophistication. I don't want to insult the Chazal, but it's a little more sophistication than, everybody's got to get paid for the time that they put in.
And therein lies the essence of the issue. If he doesn't get paid for his time, then there's a chash ribis. I mean, in a general sense, when you get paid for your time, you got paid for your time. Everything is above board. When you don't get paid for your time and you don't make any money, then there's a chashash ribis because the investor will have gotten a benefit on his loan. Remember, it's a 50-50. On his loan, he will have gotten a benefit for which he didn't have to pay. Why? Because he didn't give him a wage. So I mean, it's around and around and around. But I think from our discussion, Michael, you understand that the Chazal had a problem with a person entering into a deal that he didn't get a wage and took a risk, and that risk didn't pay off, and he worked very hard for that risk. An observer would say that work is something you gave the investor free. And free means ribis. Free means ribis. The fact that he lent you $500 and you worked and no one made money, or at least you didn't make any money, that Chazal say is chashash ribis. All right. So listen, there's a lot more to this. We'll go into detail, and we have to think about maybe over the week. but I think, Michael, once you understand what Chazal was after here and why they couch it in these terms, that's why this Iska is problematic. You're 100% right. If the whole thing was an investment and no loan, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We're only having the discussion because Chazal said that when you in a partnership, i.e., I give you money, it's not all. Now, this, by the way, only matters if there's an agreement on the upside and the downside. If there's no agreement on the downside, then there's no issue of ribis. Because if the issue only is if we make money, then all right, we didn't make money, but okay, fine. But because on the downside, I walk away with no money and I have to pay out of my pocket, someone looking at the deal is going to shake his head and say, this is unfair. This looks like a benefit to the lender without compensation.
So, Rabbi, are you saying that if the investor said, I'll absorb all the losses and I'm not going to pay you for your time, but I'll absorb all the losses, that would be an okay agreement, and you'll split the profits. If there are no profits, I'll absorb all the losses. That would be okay, even though he wasn't compensated for his wages.
Correct.
Okay.
The key is because it's a loan. Once you say, I take all the responsibility, that takes it off the table, because then I made an investment. It didn't work out. Fine.
But the worker did still put their time in.
But it isn't dependent on a loan. The key is that there was no loan here for which he didn't get compensated. He didn't get compensated because he made a bad deal, but that happens all the time and there's no issue. It's only if I lend you money and you don't get compensated, that's where the problem arises.
Okay. Thank you.
Fascinating discussion, but we're now getting into this issue of ISKA, which is very important, because it has ramifications today. How do people get into business? That's really the whole question, is how people get into business without having ribis. So Mitzvah Shem will continue on. We'll delve more deeply into this discussion. But I think the ground rules for the discussion have now been established, even though Michael, is that the Chazal laid the ground rules. And we can only play by the rules that they make. And so that's what we have to say. And then each piece of this Mishnah will be discussed in the Gemara in greater detail. So I think we'll have a better understanding next week. And everybody have a safe week and a warm week. And Mitzvah Shem,